Welcome back to DASAR. My name is Darshan Doshi. We have a superb guest with us today, Nick Petrie. I've known him for a few years, admire a lot of his work, learned a lot from him. Nick Petrie, just a quick overview of Nick. Nick is someone who has worked a lot of years in leadership development, in people development, in resilience, and he's going to share a little bit of his own personal experience today, which is going to be quite fascinating and interesting to hear about as well. But professionally, Nick, he's the head of executive development at Cultivating Leadership. He's also part of the Center for Creative Leadership. He was an owner at Performance at Work and has a master's degree from Howard University. So overall, Nick is someone who has years and years of experience of coaching executives to become better. He's also part of the Adaption and the Jump Shift family. He's on the advisory board, helping us create some of the best experiences, some of the best thought leadership around resilience, around vertical development. And we're going to touch base on a few of these topics today. So Nick, welcome to DASAR. I am so excited to have you here. There's so much to talk, so much to learn from you, but welcome to DASAR.
Thanks, Darshan. Thanks for inviting me.
Nick is joining us from New Zealand. My first question to you, Nick, is around resilience. You've spent so many years around resilience, and post-COVID, there are a lot of challenges around mental health, mental fitness, and one of the things that I see quite widely is around friends, family, who are having a lot of tough time dealing with the pressure, the stress at work, the stress at home, livelihoods, their own lives were in danger with COVID-19. And I think what we have seen is the pandemic coming through COVID, but we are now started to experience a pandemic on mental health. And this is where I feel, resilience is a very important concept. But maybe you could start by giving an overview of what does really resilience mean and how does one go about being more or becoming more resilient? Maybe some thoughts on that?
Sure. So sort of the way people have traditionally thought about it is it's about being able to bounce back from adversity. And that's sort of true, but that also denotes that life's events are going to knock you around. So when you think about sort of stress, for example, it's on a continuum. One end is trauma, and then the other end is day-to-day stress. And if you experience a trauma, you might grieve, you might need to get counseling, you might need to take some drugs. But what most people are dealing with most of the time is this day-to-day stress and getting overwhelmed by it. So I was heavily influenced by this body of research, which is what my mentor did at the University of York. And he sort of looked at the idea that traditionally we think our stress is caused by events. And really, if you have these various events, you're going to get stressed. But one of the things they saw in their research was that different people were going through the same events. Some people were getting completely stressed and overwhelmed, and another person in the same job or exactly the same event wasn't getting stressed at all. They were resilient. They weren't getting overwhelmed, and they were interested in why. And so it's a couple of big ideas which emerged from the research. The first one was that there was a difference between pressure on one hand and stress on the other. And usually we put these together, but if you separate them apart, you start to get some options. So they came to define pressure as external demand in your environment. So it's workloads, it's deadlines, it's changes, it's moving house. It's just all the normal things which happen, which most people are sort of feeling overwhelmed by. Everyone had pressure. Everyone's got pressures on them. It's pretty much unavoidable, but not everyone is stressed. You can see this when you go into workplaces or you've got different people in your family. And what the researchers noticed was that to convert the pressure into stress, you need to do something very specific, and that was to ruminate about the event. And rumination is thinking over and over again about events from the past or the future, attaching negative emotion to them, and churning over and over and over about. And so, if you think about things you are stressed about at the moment, you'll probably notice those are the things you are ruminating about. And if there might be some areas in your life where you've got a lot of pressure on you at the moment, but you're not stressed. And if you pay attention to that, you'll notice that you are not ruminating about those areas. So a big part of the resilience work I do is less around trying to get rid of the pressures of your life, because in fact, a lot of those pressures are what might make you very successful, is becoming much more effective at handling the pressure without turning into rumination. And that's a lot of the work we do, is helping people just notice how much of their day they are ruminating. And if they were to be able to reduce that, as I sort of learnt to do, and many others who we've done this work with have also learnt to do, they end up being quite resilient. It is less about trying to keep your head above water, and it's more about starting to notice there is no water there. There is nothing to keep your head above. You're creating it in your mind. So that's sort of the first pieces that we sort of get into around resilience.
Brilliant, and just a simple way of explaining what rumination is and what pressure and stress are. Now, you work with a lot of executives around the world to help them make more resilient and thereby their companies as well. Maybe some examples where you see a person or a company, like a before after scenario where they have become slightly better or significantly better on the resiliency scale. Maybe some thoughts or examples around that?
Yeah, sure. One of the things people get when they do this work, we get them to take an assessment, because the first step is really about increasing your self-awareness about how much you are doing this rumination, and also what is driving your rumination up or helping you get it down. So it's on a scale of 0 to 10. When people do this, they often notice they score 9 or 10 out of rumination. So they're doing it all the time. And then we'll do just that first self-awareness. At first, people get quite stressed about that. They start stressing about their rumination, which you really don't want to ruminate about your rumination. But just actually knowing that you are doing it and having a word for it makes an enormous difference, because then you can actually start to catch yourself doing it. So I did it with an energy company in Houston, and it was their top 120 leaders. They all went through it, and we measured all of their results to see how they were. And we did 3 2-hour sessions, but people only came along for one of those. And we taught them what to do, which is essentially around catching yourself waking up, because that's the first step of 4. When you are ruminating, you are having a dream. We feel like this stuff is real, but what we're actually freaking out about is the dream we are having in our head. We're having a nightmare about some scenario, but we don't realize it's a dream. We think it's real. And so the first step we help people to do is catch themselves and then wake up. It's a nightmare that you're having. And so we taught them various different steps, and then we did a follow-up 12 months later. And what we saw was that there was a big drop in their rumination scores. There's 8 measures. All of their scores came down. There's other ones around toxic achieving, avoidance of issues. All of them came down. So it was really good results. What was better, though, is we gave them resources to go out for each of them and to teach their team. So there was 120 of them, and each of them taught about 10 people what they'd learned, and they discussed it as a team. So it went from 120 out to 1,200 people. And so it scaled really well. In fact, as you know, Darshan, knowing what I know now and you know now, we could have scaled it in a different way and collected all the results. But we did do a case study. 12 months later, you could see the numbers had changed. We didn't have it all on adaption at that stage.
Great example of how to tackle and how assessments also play a big part. And second, how to scale this ability across organizations and people. And we'll get back to that. Now, I want to talk about something which is very personal to you. And I'm curious to learn about it myself. You've beaten cancer. And that's only the thing that I know about. If you're willing to share, I'd love to learn, what was your feeling? What did you feel? What was the experience? The moment you figured out you had cancer, what were the early years like? And, just some thoughts around your own ability of, your mental fitness, your resilience, some thoughts kind of looking back today on beating cancer.
So it was in my 20s. I was playing rugby for a living professionally around the world, and in one of the seasons I was playing in Japan. I was playing a game, and during the game my head was just throbbing, and I couldn't run, so I had to go off the field. It was the last game, so I flew back to New Zealand, and my mother met me at the airport, and she said, "You don't look good at all," and she took me into hospital. And over a series of about a week, they did various tests, but they couldn't quite work out what was going on. So they did an operation to have a look. What they discovered was I had 3 big cancerous tumors in my abdomen. So they did a big operation for 5 hours. They took out the tumors, but they had to take out my stomach, my spleen, part of my pancreas. I couldn't eat for several months, actually, and I lost a lot of weight. But what I decided to do afterwards was I just tried to pretend it had never happened. And so I said, I'm going to put my old life back together the same way. I'll go back to Japan, which I did. And I essentially just tried to put all the ingredients of my life back together exactly the same way. And same ingredients, 12 months later, I got the same result. And so my oncologist said, it's come back, it's spread to your liver. And they got a temporary treatment. And they said, this will work for a while. But what happened to me is same as all cancer patients. They just say you've got to get another test every 3 months or 6 months. And you just spend your whole time worrying about what the result's going to be. What if it comes back? And I was like, what if I don't live till I'm 30? What if I never get married? What if? I got really, really stressed. And that's actually when I came across my mentor who helped me with the stress stuff. And he taught me what to do. And that's how I was able to bring my stress level down. So that was a huge thing. Being able to bring my stress level down was the first thing. But even once I'd done that, I was sort of left with a big question because I didn't want to go back and repeat what I'd already done and get the same result again 12 months later. I just thought something's got to change. I've got to change the ingredients or I'm going to get the same result. So I tried to, I did research on who lives the longest after a cancer diagnosis and sort of saw there seemed to be general patterns that the people who lived the longest, they made transformational changes in different areas of their life. Physically, stuff like what are they eating, how are they exercising, how are they looking after themselves, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And so I looked at all the things and I just started doing a whole lot of things differently, changed as many ingredients as I could, and things went really well. One of the hard things for me, though, was like I was looking at if I'm not going to do that, what am I going to do with my life? I don't know how long I've got. I might have 3 years. I might have 30 years. I don't know. They didn't have a treatment, still don't have a treatment for this type of cancer. So I thought for like a year or two. And the question I kept asking myself was, what really matters? And I thought about this, initially I was saying, well, can I be as rich as I can? I was like, I don't know if that matters. Can I be as successful as I can? I'm like, I don't know if that matters. I just kept asking when I look back at the end of my life, whenever that is, what will tell me it's been a worthwhile life? And thought about this for a long time. And my conclusion in the end was I'll feel good and that it was a worthwhile life if I've contributed as much as I possibly can to others around me. I thought, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to volunteer in all these different places and contribute lots of stuff. And I got the shock of my life because no one wanted my help. And the reason was I didn't really have a lot to offer. I've been playing rugby. I was saying, I'll do this for you, I'll do this for you. And no one really, thought that would be helpful. And I was sort of shocked. But I had the big wake up. It wasn't enough to sort of want to contribute. I needed to develop something which was valuable and rare that would be useful for people. And that's when I said, what is that going to be? And I looked and I looked and I looked. And in the end, I wrote down 3 circles. It was where do I have some talent? Where do I have some passion? And where's the world's greatest need? And I sort of tried to work out what's in the intersection of those 3 circles. And for me, that looked like helping people grow, develop, get unstuck. And so I took that path. And sort of that was my start into this field.
Brilliant. I don't have any words. So you've not beaten cancer once, but twice. And I hear this from you time and time again in, when in our conversation is you're always trying to bring everyone, the whole team, the adaption team, and everyone that I've kind of seen you talk to is what is the most important thing, right? Which is what matters the most. And it's always very heartening to see this. But one of the things, as a follow-up question, if you don't mind, is you wanted to contribute, you wanted to figure out, which a popular concept is ikigai, essentially, what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and what the world needs. But even from there, it's a difficult point, right? You thought
Mm,
you could contribute the most when you're helping people become better versions of themselves. And for me, it's the same at DASAR. That's essentially what we want to do. We want to impact a few lives and just get them fitter, get them financially free, and get them in the ability of taking action. Not talk less, do more. But
hmm
once you get started on that journey, how does that look like? Because you're in your 20s, there's not a lot of experience around domain expertise, or not a lot of corporate experience, which you today have,
mm,
right? But
mm.
at the time, maybe some thoughts around how did you go about building that mindset, that skill set, that expertise, that domain knowledge in the early years?
That's exactly right. I mean, that's the right order. I found that once I'd worked out sort of what was the general path to take, and it felt to me as well, I remember at the time, it was always about what's my natural path at this point in time, because I felt like it's very easy, because I saw it around me with other people and I'd seen it with myself. It's very easy to go down sort of false paths, but once you can sort of sense into what's your natural path, and it takes a lot of reflection, I think, and going inward, things just start to flow. Good coincidences happen, lots of luck. It just feels like the path opens up, was my experience and has been, but there's always sort of these diversions which want to pull you off towards this or that. And as soon as I noticed myself going off on those paths, things would slow down, get hard. But there's always these temptations. And so once I knew that, I don't know if I knew what I was looking for or the world provided or something, but I ran into a friend of mine from high school actually, and back in Christchurch, I had no idea how I was going to get started, and I asked him what he's doing, and he said, "Oh, I've started this. I've got this training company. We train people in workplaces." And I said, "I'd love to be able to join." And he was an entrepreneur, getting things started, and this company's going well. And he goes, "What experience have you got?" I said, "Oh, look, I've been playing rugby, but," I said, "if you give me a chance, I promise you I will make it work. I will make it work." And he told me later it was my conviction that I would make it work that made him decide to take a chance and give me this job. And I was terrible to start with, but I was enthusiastic and I was very motivated. I just thought this is the right place. So essentially, I did what I think what most people improve quickly. I just kept putting myself out into situations I didn't know how to do, which was everything at that stage. And I just stayed on that path for a decade, essentially. Keep doing stuff I didn't know how to do. And I was in a field where there was so much new stuff. There was so many different opportunities and different clients and up and down the organization that as long as you would just keep consistently on that path and keep being uncomfortable, you couldn't help but grow. So that's what I did for a decade. But I will say, I was so motivated and driven not to waste my life. It itself turned into a bit of a trap because I got so obsessed with not wasting my life that I eventually I overdid it and I pushed myself too hard, and I actually needed to lighten up a bit. I wasn't actually that important. So I'd say that's the sort of also the balance of it. I probably didn't understand balance and polarities, and what I was doing didn't matter quite as much as I thought it did in my mind. It was the right path, but take it lightly.
Amazing. I mean, the kind of reflections that you're sharing. I just hope everyone in this world is able to listen to you and listen to this podcast. Now, I'm going to just talk a little bit about vertical development. You've done a lot of work around vertical development and helping people move up the level. But what does that really mean? Because there are two camps: those who believe that it is natural and I will get better irrespective of someone helping me or not, because if I'm hungry to become better, I will figure out a way to become better. But then there are also a line of thought which says, here are the frameworks, here are mental models, here are, some experiences, here is a coach to guide you through this process. Now, personally, I've been fortunate to get a bit of coaching and level up over the years myself. But coming back to the question of vertical development, what is vertical development? What are the stages of development of an adult? And maybe some examples around, in your experience, that you've seen people and companies move up or down these stages of development.
So it's probably worth just thinking, first of all, for people about times when they have grown or got better or learned. What did that look like? Because there's different types of development. So sometimes, you've got people saying, if I just work hard and focus, I'll get better. And you probably will, but it might be skill acquisition. It might be information. It might be knowledge. And that's sort of like if your mind is a cup, you are filling up the cup with more content. And that's one type of development. We call that horizontal development. You sort of grow the content in your cup, but you stay on the same level. There's another type of development. And to sort of give an example, after I got sick and did all that reflection, it was an incredibly hard situation, did a lot of reflection, and I came out of it at the end, and my mindset was different. I wasn't really the same person as I had been before I went into the situation. I used to just sort of drift around. Wherever the wind blew me, that's the direction I'd go. Afterwards, the things which used to matter didn't matter anymore. Like, for example, I couldn't play golf because afterwards I found it pointless. Why? And I used to love golf, but why do I want to put this little ball in the hole? Things which used to be really important to me had sort of dissipated, and I couldn't care about them afterwards. Something had fundamentally changed. And that sort of gets to the second type of growth we'd call vertical growth. This is when you are growing, and instead of filling the cup, it's like you're expanding the cup itself. Your capacity is changing. The cup is transforming. You are transforming. And so if people think back to, let's say, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, how you used to think about the world, what you used to value, we think it's consistent, but it's actually not. Our mindset is quite different. So researchers who studied this, especially around people in workplaces and leaders, found that people evolve through these predictable stages of development. One of the early ones, I'll run through some of them. Diplomat Stage is a lot around conforming, fitting in, wanting to know what the rules of my tribe or my group or my company are so that I can sort of be part of the group. And often in our 20s or when we're at high school or college or when we first join a company, it's a lot about that diplomat mindset of wanting to belong and fit in. But then people can grow out of that, and they start, like a bit like me, who said, I need to have some skills, something to offer. I need to have a craft, some knowledge. And that's getting into the expert stage, where you want to master your craft. You want to know everything about your field, your domain. I want to have all the answers. I'm going to use a lot of logic. You see, doctors, lawyers, accountants are often dominated by people in that expert mindset. And it's good. However, once you start managing people, it's not enough just to have knowledge. You need to get outcomes. And this is where people get into this achiever stage, where it's about outcomes, results, numbers, delivering. And that's where most organizations and their leaders are roughly at this achiever mindset. It's a really good one. It's a really important one, but it's not the end of development. People move beyond that when they start to say, is that all it's about? I mean, I've already achieved a lot. I've already hit a lot of my goals, but I don't feel as satisfied as I used to. What else is there? Is there something more meaningful than this, or do I just keep achieving for the next 30 years? When people do that, they get into this stage called redefining. And, people talk about a midlife crisis. We'd see this more as people are starting to redefine who they are, what's important, what sort of work they want to do, what sort of career they want to have, what contribution do they want to make. And there are a lot of leaders and organizations right now who are shifting from achieving to redefining. And this pandemic has got a lot of those people really rethinking things and quitting their jobs, frankly, is one outcome which is happening. So a lot of people are in there and it feels very shaky because it doesn't feel like achieving and it feels disconcerting, but you are asking a lot of new questions. It's very valuable. People can go beyond that into transforming. And this is where people can really start to see the systems they're operating in. They can start to use power in very ethical ways. They start to take a longer term perspective. It's almost like they can see the big picture now. They are not in it like they were in achieving. Now they are up on the balcony and they can see much more. Stages can go on beyond there, but you tend not to see people in organizations from those stages.
Brilliant. And just on the continuing the thought of COVID, we have had massive lockdowns around the world. I know there's a lockdown
Yeah.
going on in New Zealand, some parts of Russia, China, and the US has been on and off, right? But in India, at least, or let's take March to May 2020, a lot of people were
Yeah.
stuck at home. And that's where a lot of people got time to really think of what's important for them because they were also thinking about survival and existence. And I think that's something that you shared a little bit about as well. We're seeing definitely a lot of people giving up their jobs, but back in, I did a quick research study of what happened during the Spanish flu. That is from 1915 to 1919. And what you'll be surprised with is similarly at that time, there was a lot of liquidity, a lot of innovation in technology. There were a lot of projects being made. And so what the economy saw was one of the greatest periods, which they called the Roaring Twenties, which was kind of a economic boom. People were starting businesses pretty much, more consistently. And my hypothesis is I think we are entering that phase in, again, Roaring 20, where we will see people launch businesses. We'll see them pushing the envelope, creating new technologies. And the outcome obviously is better economic development, but really, if you think about it, it's society development, right? Just wanted to share that quick thought. And we need to study our history. We need to study what the Spanish flu did to the people, to the society, and there's a lot for us to learn from those historical experiences as well. Now, you've talked about vertical development. You've laid out very nicely what these stages of development are. You also talk a lot about heat experiences, right? I'm curious to learn what are these heat experiences and how does this help anyone, or how can one create? Can you create an artificial heat experience? Does it always have to be a life situation that throws up a situation to create a heat experience? Maybe some thoughts around these two topics.
Firstly, if you think about and if listeners think about a time when they grew a lot in their life, and we've done research on this, what people tend to talk about is not a course they went to or something they read. They talk about some experience they had which really put a massive amount of pressure on them and they didn't know how to handle it with their current toolkit. And so heat experiences have 5 conditions. It's a first time experience. You haven't done this thing before. It's brand new to you. You've not faced it, so you don't know what to do. Results matter. This is something which is actually really important. There's a chance of success or a chance of failure, and you don't know which way things are going to go. Important people are often watching to see how things are going to go, whether they're in the workplace or it is in your community or family. And fifth, these experiences are extremely uncomfortable. Most people want to avoid these experiences. In fact, in the research that we did, a lot of people said they didn't want the experience. Like their boss gave them this big new role and they're like, I'm not ready, I'm not the right person. But looking back later, they said that was the time in my career of my greatest growth. Sometimes they're within work and they're given to us. Sometimes they just come from out of the blue from life. It's your health, it's a divorce, it is, for a lot of people, it's living overseas for the very first time, because nothing about how they used to live in India or the US is the same when they get to this new country. And it is so disorientating. The only way through it is to make new mental maps and models of how things work. And then you've got a whole lot of new ones. So that's what the heat experiences are. To your other questions, sometimes, they're all around us. Always. Sometimes they're really big things. Sometimes they're small things. What I've noticed as I've studied people in workplaces and leaders, the real question is, are you someone who moves towards them or moves away from them? That seems to be the big differentiator. The leaders who I see grow a lot, they tend to seek the heat, we would say. And I've often noticed with people who grow fast, there's a sort of 3-year cycle. In year 1, they'll get into this heat experience. They're like, whoa, I'm in over my head. The sort of water's up here and I'm sort of trying to survive here. In year 2, they start to get the hang of it. They sort of know how to do this. And in year 3, you can imagine what they're like. They're sort of bored. They're looking around and they're looking for their next heat experience. And it's often sort of cycles of about 3 years, I see. And they just stack these up. And then eventually they get to a point where they just feel like they've seen pretty much everything. And they become, in your words, Darshan, anti-fragile. Because they've seen there, they've done it. It doesn't matter if there's new experiences. They know they can handle a lot of heat. So they become anti-fragile.
Now, we can't not talk about adaptation and the vertical mindset indicator, right? Now, this is a program that you, Carl, have developed. Jan has been involved right through. So vertical mindset indicator, what is it? What is the program about? It's catching, or it's being adopted across the world like wildfire, right? It's been growing rapidly within adaptation. So maybe you can share some thoughts around what is the vertical mindset indicator, who is it for, and what can they expect out of it?
We were very interested in how people grow through these stages because it makes a big difference to people from what stage they're operating at. Often we'll get stuck and we just need to unblock and grow, and we'll overcome many of our challenges because we'll be able to see them from a new vantage point. And one of the things which gets people really excited and motivated to grow is being able to get an assessment to show them, where is your mindset or stage? Where do you tend to operate from at the moment? And there were assessments out there, and I'd used a lot of them. So I knew that people really loved them. The problem were they were pretty expensive. To do them and get debriefed was over $1,000 for many of them, and they were really good. And so you could use them with the very, very top executives because they had the budget, but you couldn't go much beyond that. And we were very interested in, this is so valuable, we'd like to get it out to as many people as possible throughout an organization and potentially outside of an organization as well. And so we said, well, how would we make this assessment shorter, cheaper, and much more scalable? And usually the answer to that question is technology. And so we said, let's see if instead of getting a human to score this, which takes a long time to score the results, and then debrief it, could we get AI or machine learning to do this? So the adaptation team over in India worked hard on this to see, is it actually possible to do this? And thanks to you and the team over there, we're able to learn that the machine learning could in fact score these reports, and they're sort of open-ended narratives. And so we're like, wow, that's amazing. Could we, rather than do full-on coach debriefs, could we do the debriefs on the adaptation platform? So you're getting all the best coaching questions, but it's on the platform. Would people answer those questions on a platform? And it turns out they did. They put in all these great answers, and then you do a follow-on coaching session from there. So what it meant was people were really uncovering something very important about their mindset. It's a question was, would people want it? And they talk about you've got product market fit when people are grabbing it out of your hands before you sort of ready to let go of it. And that's what ended up happening. So it's in big organizations at the moment, spreading, and then we're also doing it outside for individuals who want to take it. And essentially it'll help you see where your mindset is, where your next stage of development is, and what are the methods and actions and approaches you can take to develop yourself to see things from a different stage.
Brilliant. It's truly democratizing leadership development, people development at scale using technology. I mean, the world will be a better place for sure. And This is how I guess we have to use the technology the right way. Now, my last question to you, there's just like entrepreneurship in the startup world, they say entrepreneurs are born, not made. Obviously, I don't agree to that. I think entrepreneurs can be made, they can be nurtured. Similarly, in the leadership development world, there is a lot of debate, or has been for a few decades, around can leadership be taught, or are people born and brought up with leadership skills? So the whole nature versus nurture debate. I'm kind of curious to learn from you because you've been in this space for a very, very long time. You've been able to transform people and companies through your efforts, through your coaching, through your programs, through your experiences, and whatnot, right? So, some thoughts around how do you view, leadership being taught versus people being born with it, and just a general debate on it.
When I was living in the US, I used to work for Center for Creative Leadership, and we would have 30,000 leaders each year come through our programs and experiences from all around the world and all sorts of different companies. And so we would watch to see what happened for groups as they did this, and what happened to the individuals. And it was very clear that leaders would change and grow. And what is leadership? It's a lot about your ability to influence others. And so, can people learn to influence others in a more effective way? And I think the answer most people would agree is yes, if you know the right methods, tools, and the impact you're having. And what we were most interested in at CCL was there's always been a big emphasis on the leader, which is a sort of very heroic way. Who is the leader? What we became very interested in is leadership. And what we saw was leadership as a process. And it wasn't just situated within one individual, it was a process which could happen across groups or multiple people. And leadership was helping clarify the direction, building alignment for people around that direction, and building commitment. And it wasn't really within one individual to do that. That was a process which could be spread across lots of individuals. And so it could certainly be learned by the whole group rather than requiring one leader who was heroic and was born with some sort of charisma or something like that. So I'd say yes to the individual. Can it be learned? Definitely. But two, it's good to go beyond that. Think what is the process of leadership rather than just the leader.
Brilliant. So this has been an awesome podcast, Nick. Thanks a lot. We've just crossed about a 40-minute mark right now. So much to learn, so many insights, and at DASAR, what we try to do is bring people such as yourself who have had such meaningful, impactful experiences, who've transformed people, who've changed the world to make it better, and really just decode and distill it down to, the few insights so that we can be better, And so, thanks a lot for joining all the way from New Zealand. This has been an awesome podcast. Really looking forward to doing a follow up on this sooner rather than later, and look forward to staying in touch with you.
You too. Thanks, Darshan.